Hi everybody, it's your girl Nicole Umberger here, and please excuse me, I don't have any makeup on or anything, so you might see a little scarring on my face. But I wanted to come on and let everybody know that I have created a group, and it is a private group on Facebook. So if you would like to be a part of this private group, you're going to have to know exactly what it is called. This is what the profile picture looks like. It is a light code that is for abundance and allowance and protection. Okay. And it's called CPS Corruption Recovery. Learn how to fight. Okay. Now, to be a member of the group, you go through a series of questions that are asked. If you are coming from this video, there will be a question. I think it's one of the questions where you put your own answer. You need to saw the YouTube video, okay? Because that is going to let me know. You know what? I could just go and add that question. Where did you hear about this group? And I will put YouTube as a multiple choice question. So that way I will know where you came from. I will make sure to link. I'll come back and link the group in the description. It's in my link tree as well. So I will actually link my link tree in the description, and you will see the group amongst all of the other socials that I'm a part of. So thank you for coming over to Nicole's Recovery Corner. And if you are an existing subscriber, thank you for subscribing. I am a mother of 4. I have 2 older boys in South Carolina that were raised by other people. I have been in and out of their lives. You know, I had my issues, and you've seen my content on that. I am now someone who has been relapse-free for several years. I am sober, and now I work to help parents and people who are recovering from addiction or coming from incarceration learn how to fight CPS corruption. My case is 14 years old, and had I not started picking up on the idea that something needed to be done, had my son not reached out to me 3 years ago to let me know that his life had been a living hell, I do not think this would be happening right now. So you need to pay attention to those motherly and fatherly maternal instincts. Because when they come and you start thinking about your child, you need to say, okay, Lord, or whatever deity you pray to, I will surrender my mind to you, and you reveal to me what it is I need to do concerning this matter, because I don't have contact with that child. I don't talk to the people that have that child. I could get in a lot of trouble with the law if I were to reach out to that child. There's not a no contact order. There never was. But when your rights are terminated, they act like you're a criminal. I surrendered myself over, and I started receiving insight about my child. My child reached out to me. I was dreaming about my child, and I found out that, you know, he was having issues. And I started doing all I could. And for 3 years, you know, he wasn't getting in trouble with the law. They found out he was talking to me, so they would make big deals out of little things to get the law involved so they could surrender him back to the system. My son's 15 years old. He had never been surrendered back to the system until they found out he was talking to me. And it's because these people were drinking. They turned into alcoholics after they went through some life issues, and they did not take the time to parent. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. Cooking meals, providing a roof and shelter and clothing does not make you a parent. What makes you a parent is being a parent, because paying the bills and providing, that's called provider. That's not the same, okay? These people were good at providing what he needed, but they were not good at parenting. And they were abusing him. And so he was put back into the system, and, you know, they wouldn't reach out to me. They didn't even think to come and check and see how I'm doing, because my rights are terminated. But I was able to prove that my whole case was corrupted. So as we know, I reached out to the commissioner. Now I am about to be approved to be a foster parent to get my child, and we're going to go from there. Now, my case is very unique, but as we have spoken about before, you need to come up with documentation of your story. You need to provide pictures of everything to make it personable. Now, I am going to read a story to you. This is not my own. This is someone else's, but I want you to hear how everything is so well articulated and put together. Now, there are not names mentioned here because this is public on the internet. She's just sharing her story. But what I would do is I would insert the names of each person. Like when you say, oh, and the foster mother did this, you would say Janet Jones, who is the foster mother, did this. Okay. So I'm going to read this to you. You can find this on parentalrights.org. Alrighty. My introduction into Child Protective Services cases was due to a grandmother in an adjoining state who called me with her tragic story. Her 2 granddaughters had been taken from her mother who lived in my district. Her mother was told wrongly that if she wanted to see her children again, she should sign a paper and give up her children. That is the lie that they present to you. If they do not have a court order to take your children and they present to you what's called a safety plan, oh, we've heard this and we've heard that. We need to come up with a safety plan so we can do an investigation. If there was any truth to their investigation, they would already have a court order. Okay? You need to know that. Okay? Sometimes they will approach your door with a police officer. That is what they are supposed to do. Never, ever speak to a caseworker who comes to your door without a police escort. By law, they are supposed to have one. They will threaten you. They will tell you, you can't record me. You need to read your state laws on recording. Utah is a one-party consent state, meaning only one party has to consent to being recorded, and we can record. But you still have to give acknowledgement of that recording. Do not let them intimidate you. Okay? Because when you start talking, and I know what you're thinking, I have nothing to hide. You are the number one target. You are the number one target. I have nothing to hide. You are the one. You have to stop that. It is, I don't have anything to hide, but I also know my rights, and I know that I don't have to talk to you. And they will tell you that you do. That's when you say, you can come back with a police officer and a court order, and you can make an appointment with my attorney at that point. Because if she comes back with a police officer and a court order, don't answer the door. Consult with an attorney. Talk to an attorney. The only time they're going to have a court order is if you have in fact done something, or if someone has provided evidence that you have done something to neglect or abuse that child. Okay? Now, I am not an attorney I am giving you experience-based information. Okay? Always go do your own research, but this is what I suggest because this is what I know is within the law. Okay? So they said her daughter was told wrongly that if she wanted to see her children again, she should sign a paper and give up her children. Frightened and young, the daughter did. I have since discovered that parents are often threatened into cooperation of permanent separation of their children. You need to know your rights. You need to know them because they will come after you. Or you will end up having a falling out with someone who will call them on you. Okay? Both times CPS was called on me in Tennessee, they were fake calls. My children were not in danger. There was nothing wrong. And do you know both of those people who called on me, they don't have their kids. So you need to understand karma comes around and people learn their lesson. But we need to learn the law and we need to learn our constitutional rights. Okay? All righty. So the children were taken to another county and placed in foster care. The foster parents were told wrongly that they could adopt the children. Foster parents are often told these things. In my case, the people that fostered my son, they weren't even married. They got married to become foster parents. That's red flag number one. The 2 women that adopted my youngest son did the same thing. Red flag. If you're not married, why are you thinking about having children? Marriage is a commitment. You need to make sure that you're good at being married before you try to find out that you're good at being parents. Okay? Um, they got married just to foster my son. Back then I thought, oh, how sweet, because she didn't think she could have children. And, that went a whole nother direction. Okay? That they will tell them, oh, well, if you will petition to terminate their rights, then you can adopt them. Foster parents, you need to learn when to say, okay, but should I do this? Most of the time when you have a foster child, if there's no proof of abuse or neglect, but the parents are being investigated, you might find that the child is like, oh, well, they enjoy being at your home. Of course, if you're a stay-at-home parent and a full-time foster mom, whereas their parents work for a living, they're going to love being at your home. You need to understand something. It might also be your job to help the other family learn how to parent through whatever communication you have. There are so many people that will look at how people are struggling, especially people that are on drugs. Oh, they're on drugs, they're stealing, they're going to jail. They don't deserve their children. No, they need help. They don't need your judgment. They weren't shown the right way to deal with their feelings. And a lot of biological parents of children that grow up to be drug addicts do not like hearing that, because that means that they have to be responsible and accountable. Let me tell you something. You need to look in the mirror and ask, where did I go wrong? When your children go through deep, deep, deep life experiences like drug addiction and alcoholism, just because you didn't use doesn't mean your children won't use. It is all about coping skills, coping mechanisms. I found out that we had a lot of dysfunctionality and codependency in my home growing up. Do you have codependency and dysfunctionality in your home? You might want to go look things up about that. You might want to go read what the signs and symptoms are and how to live differently with a healthy mentality and environment that is stable and not narcissistic or dysfunctional. Things like that. They don't like hearing that. But I wish foster parents that have communication with parents that are trying to get their kids back would actually stop thinking, oh, I need to take this kid. You need to wait, and you need to see, what are these parents doing? Are they trying? Are they doing what they're supposed to be doing? And don't trust what the caseworker says, because if you adopt, that caseworker and her department gets a bonus from the state. Okay? You are making money for the state. And some people, they think it's a really good thing. Okay, honey. Some people think it's a really good thing. Oh, well, I'm taking in this child. The state's paying you $900 a month to take in that child. You can't tell me that that's not a red flag. Oh, well, that's to take care of the child. Do you know how many foster parents actually spend every dime on what that child needs? The child gets insurance through the state. The child gets food stamps. So what's the $900 for? Are you buying them clothing? Are you buying them toys? Are you paying for get-togethers for them and their parents? Maybe some type of get-together they could have fun? No, you're only thinking about yourself. Now, if you are a foster parent that does give that money to the children, wonderful. That's great. There are some foster parents that actually do try to think about, how can I help this family? If this child wasn't hurt and this family just needs some help, how can I be a help? Or maybe it is just your job to just help that child. But look for that discernment. Look for those inward answers and stop trusting everything that the CPS worker tells you. Okay? Sometimes those parents haven't done a daggone thing to lose that child. And CPS is overthinking and in overdrive. My story is just one of hundreds of thousands every day that are coming forward. I mean, I have two boys. I have two separate stories that I feel is corruption. I feel that my younger son, that his case was corrupted. The judge was not going to allow them to adopt my son because he didn't want to be adopted. And those two women and the caseworker turned around and found a judge that would say yes, without knowing the full case or what my son had been saying he wanted. They knew that judge was going to award my mom custody. And that's why they did that. There's corruption everywhere, guys. And we need to recognize it. You want to be a good foster mom, good foster dad? Look at how you can help this child be a better person, and look at how you can help this child possibly influence the parents. Hey, you need to get help. You need to be better. You need to learn about why you do what you do. Because right now, I'm living it up with strangers. And I want to come home one day. But if you don't get help, I'm not going to come home. And no, a child shouldn't be speaking like that. But I mean, sometimes that's what it takes. Especially when they're older children. Like, hey, you need to get it together. You know, don't be mad at these people. You know what I mean? But when you've got cases that, nah, my parents are good and I want to go home, I don't want to be here, really look into it. Really ask questions and find out what's really going on. Because your interaction in the whole thing with the child is what's going to matter. Trying to talk that child into, oh, your parents were bad to you. You don't have the right to do that. You don't have the right to discuss anything like that. Now, if that child confides in you, that's one thing, but that child also has insurance and is able to go talk to therapists and counselors. They are the medical professionals, not the foster parents, okay? We need to know our places. Sorry, I didn't mean to get off on that. All right, so let me go back to that. All right, and so the foster mom was wrongly told that she could adopt the children. The grandmother then jumped through every hoop known to man in order to get her granddaughters. When the case finally came to court and it was made evident by one of the foster parents' children that the foster parents had at any given time 18 foster children and that the foster mother had an inappropriate relationship with the caseworker. There are people that make a career out of having foster children. Yeah, how can you attend to each child when you've got, come on now, at any given time, 18? In the courtroom, the juvenile judge acted as though she was shocked and said the two girls would be removed quickly. They were not removed. Finally, after much pressure being applied to D.C. Department of Family and Children's Services in Georgia, the children were driven to South Georgia to meet their grandmother, who gladly drove to meet them. After being with their grandmother for 2 or 3 days, the judge, quite out of nowhere, wrote up a new order to send the girls to their father, who previously had no interest in the case and lived on the West Coast. The father was in adult entertainment. His girlfriend worked as an escort. His brother, who also worked in the business, had a sexual charge brought up against him. Within a couple of days, the father was knocking on the grandmother's door and took the girls kicking and screaming to California. The father developed an unusual relationship with the former foster parents and soon moved to the Southeast. The foster parents began driving to the father's residence and picking up the little girls for visits. The oldest child had told her mother and grandmother on 2 different occasions that the foster father molested her. To this day, after 5 years, this loving, caring, blood relative grandmother does not even have visitation privileges with the children. The little girls are, in my opinion, permanently traumatized. And the young mother of the girls was also traumatized with shock when the girls were first removed from her, that she has never completely recovered. My ex-husband, who is the biological father of my 2 youngest boys that were taken from us, is still in his addiction. It is December of 2022. It's December 30th of 2022. Tomorrow is New Year's Eve. And let me tell you, he is still struggling because he has never fully recovered from this. DCS, CPS, DCFS, they destroy lives. Okay. These little girls, okay, we said that. They are, in my opinion, permanently traumatized, and the young mother of the girls was so traumatized with shock when the girls were first removed that she has never completely recovered. The mother has rights, but the father still has custody of the children. Isn't that something? Now, if I have rights, shouldn't I have the right to sign my children over to my mother? She should have got an attorney. She probably couldn't afford one. They make it impossible these days to do anything. Throughout this case, through the process of dealing with multiple other mismanaged cases of Department of Family and Children's Services, I have worked with other desperate parents across the state of Georgia and in many other states because their children were taken for no cause and they have no one with whom to turn. I have witnessed ruthless behavior from many caseworkers, social workers, investigators, lawyers, judges, therapists, and others such as those who pick up the children, I have been stunned by what I have seen and heard from victims all across the land. You cannot trust state-issued, state-appointed doctors. You can't. Because they are going to say whatever they can to keep that child on psychiatric meds, whatever they can do to get more money. In this report, I have focused mainly on the Georgia Department of Family and Children's Services. However, I believe Child Protective Services nationwide has become corrupt and that the entire system is broken beyond repair. I am convinced parents and families should be warned of the dangers. The Department of Child Protective Services, known as the Department of Family and Children's Services in Georgia and other titles in other states, has become a protected empire built on taking children and separating families. This is not to say there are not those children who do need to be removed from wretched situations and need protection. However, this report is concerned with children and parents caught up in legal kidnapping, ineffective policies, and agency that on certain occasions would not remove a child or children when the child was enduring torment or abuse. In one county in my district, I arranged a meeting for 37 families to speak freely and without fear. These poor parents and grandparents spoke of their painful, heart-wrenching encounters with DFCS. Their suffering was overwhelming. They wept and cried. Some did not know where their children were and had not seen them in years. I had witnessed a Gestapo at work, and I witnessed the deceitful conditions under which children were taken in the middle of the night out of hospitals, off school buses, out of homes. In one county, a private drug testing business was operating within the agency's department that required many drug tests from parents and individuals for profit. It has already made over $100,000. When you are being investigated by a Department of Child Services, you are not to give them a drug screen if you are already being tested by another professional entity. Say you're a methadone patient in the methadone clinic. They aren't supposed to be screening you. They should be getting records from the clinic that screens you on a monthly or bi-weekly basis. If you are in the pain clinic and you get drug screened on a monthly basis, they're supposed to be using those drug screens. That's specifically in their policy. So if you deal with them and they want to screen you and you get screened on a monthly basis, you can let them go read your state policy and procedure on CPS drug screening. Due to being exposed, several employees in this particular office were fired. However, they have now been rehired either in neighboring counties or in the same county again. According to the calls I am now receiving, the conditions in that county are returning to the same practices they had before the light was shown on their evil deeds. Having worked with probably 300 cases statewide, and now hundreds across the nation, my eyeball is itching. In nearly every state, I am convinced there is no responsibility and no accountability in Child Protective Services system. I have come to the conclusion that poor parents are very often targeted to lose their children because they do not have the wherewithal to hire lawyers and fight the system. This is exactly why I am doing what I am doing. I am doing this to protect you. You don't need an attorney. That attorney, the court-appointed attorneys are probably conspiring with DCS. Mine did. He conspired with my caseworker against me so he could be juvenile court judge. And that man has been sitting in the juvenile court judge seat ever since my son was taken from me. So learn how to fight them on your own. Find all the information you can. Google. Join my group that will be linked in the description in my link tree. Join that group. It is a private group. You can even post anonymously. Being poor does not mean you are not a good parent or that you do not love your child or that your child should be removed and placed with strangers. That all parents are capable of making mistakes and that making a mistake does not mean your children are to be removed from the home. Even if the home is not perfect, it is home, and that's where a child is safest, where he or she wants to be, with family. That parenting classes, anger management classes, counseling referrals, therapy classes, and on are demanded of parents with no compassion by the system, even while the parents are at work and while their child are separated from them. So you take our child, which is emotionally distressing and traumatic to us, and then you expect us to jump through all these hoops and prove all these things to you while we still are supposed to hold a job and provide all the needs. It's ridiculous. Sometimes parents are required, and if you get food stamps, sometimes your food stamps get taken away from you if you're under investigation, I have heard. Sometimes parents are required to pay for the programs. And you know what? CPS is supposed to be providing free programs to you. We had to pay for drug screening while we were being screened every month somewhere else. They made us pay for drug screenings. That cost $50 every time for both of us, sometimes more. Some parents are required to pay for the programs. This can take months or even years, and it emotionally devastates both parents and children. Parents are victimized by the system that makes a profit for holding children longer and bonuses for not returning children to their parents. They do not get bonuses to reunite you with your children. If they did, we would not be having this conversation. I had a caseworker literally tell me on the phone earlier this year, we don't get bonuses for taking children. I let her think whatever she wanted to think. I was like, ma'am, you think whatever you want to think, but I have read, yes, in fact, you do. You don't get bonuses for returning them. She must not have known about the Clinton Care Act that came out when Bill Clinton was in office, where each state gets almost $10,000 for each child adopted out by a non-relative. Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. Let's see. Parents are victimized. Okay, we read that. That caseworkers and social workers are often guilty of fraud. They withhold and destroy evidence. They fabricate evidence. And they seek to terminate parental rights unnecessarily. They took my rights for not seeing my child for 4 months. They withheld him from me for 4 months and then terminated my rights because I didn't get to see him. You kept him from me just so you could do that. And then you coerced me into lying at my own hearing. You coerced me and my ex-husband into lying when you said, don't bring any of that up. Yeah, they do it every day, y'all. She done it on the first case she ever had. Imagine how many children over 14 years have been taken from their parents wrongfully just for one caseworker lying. Okay, however, when charges are made against child services, the charges are ignored. That's why you have to go to federal court. Don't go to state, go to federal court. The separation of families and snatching of children is growing as a business because local governments have grown accustomed to having these taxpayer dollars to balance their ever-expanding budgets. Honey, your state leaders are involved. That Child Protective Services and juvenile court can always hide behind a confidentiality clause in order to protect their decisions and keep funds flowing. There should be open courts, open records, and court watches. Look who is being paid. There are state employees, lawyers, court investigators, guardian ad litems, court personnel, and judges. There are psychologists and psychiatrists, counselors, caseworkers, therapists, foster parents, adopted parents, and on. All are looking to the children in state custody to provide job security. Parents do not realize that social workers are the glue that hold the system together, that funds the court-appointed attorneys, and multiple other jobs, including system psychiatrists, therapists, their own attorneys, and others. The Adoption and Safe Families Act, set in motion first in 1974 by Walter Mondale and later 1997 by President Bill Clinton, offered cash bonuses to the states for every child they adopted out of foster care. That's tax-free cash bonuses. In order to receive adoption incentive bonuses, local child protective services need more children. They must have merchandise, children, that sells, and they must have plenty so the buyer can choose. You want to know where all this trafficking started? It started right within your own states. Some counties are known to give a $4,000 to a $6,000 bonus for each child adopted out to strangers, and an additional $2,000 for a special needs child. Employees work to keep the federal dollars flowing. They work to take your children to keep these funds coming in, y'all. State departments of human resources and affiliates are given a baseline of expected adoptions based on population. For every child DHR and CPS can get adopted, there is the bonus of $4,000 or maybe $6,000, but that is only the beginning figure in the formula in which each bonus is multiplied by the percentage that the state has managed to exceed its baseline adoption number. Therefore, states and local communities work hard to reach their goals for increased numbers of adoptions in children in foster care. That there is double dipping. The funding continues as long as the child is out of the home. There is funding for foster care then when a child is placed with a new family. When a child is placed in a mental health facility, when he's placed with a new family, then adoption bonus funds are available. When a child is placed in a mental health facility and is on 16 drugs per day, like 2 children of the constituent of mine, more funds are involved, and so is Medicaid. So if you're a foster parent and you've got kids on a bunch of pills, guess what? You get more than $900 a month as a subsidy. That number goes up. So of course you want to keep those children sick so you can keep having that money coming in. Sick, isn't it? As you can see, this program is ordered from the very top and run by Human Health Services, or Health and Human Services. This is why victims of CPS get no help from their legislators. It explains why my bill, SB 415, suffered such defeat in the Judicial Committee, why I was cut off at every juncture. Legislators and governors must remember who funds their paychecks, that there are no financial resources and no real drive to unite a family to help them to keep them together or provide effective care, that the incentive for social workers to return children to their parents quickly after taking them has disappeared, and who in protective services will step up to the plate and say, this must end? No one, because they are all in the system together, and a system with no leader and clear policies will always fail the children. Just look at the waste in government that is forced upon the taxpayer. We paid $20,000 in taxes this year, my husband did. That the policy manual is considered the last word for CPS DFCS. However, it is too long, too confusing, poorly written, and does not take the law into consideration. That if the lives of children were improved by removing them from their homes, there might be a greater need for protective services, but today children are not safer. Children of whom I am aware have been raped and impregnated in foster care. I have never heard a child in foster care say, oh, I was so much better in foster care than I was with my parents. Now, I've heard stories, but I have personally never met anybody face to face. I've met people on the internet, but it is very rare. Usually people that are taken from their parents by DCS, they didn't need to be taken. It is a known fact that children are in much more danger in foster care than they are in their home, even though home may not be perfect. That some parents are even told if they want to see their child or grandchildren, they must divorce their spouse. I was told that I needed to divorce Josh. Many who are underprivileged, feeling they have no option, will divorce and then just continue to live together. This is an anti-family policy, but parents will do anything to get their children home with them. However, when the parents cooperate with Child Protective Services, their behavior is interpreted as guilt when nothing could be further from the truth. Fathers, non-custodial parents, I must add, are oftentimes treated as criminals without access to visit or even see their own children and have child support payments strangling the very life out of them. That the Foster Parents Bill of Rights does not stress that a foster parent is there temporarily to care for a child until the child can be returned home. Many foster parents today use the Foster Parent Bill of Rights as a means to hire a lawyer and seek to adopt the child placed in their care from the real parents who are desperately trying to get their child home and out of the system. Recently in Atlanta, a young couple learning to be new parents and loving it were told that because of anonymous complaint, their daughter would be taken into custody by DFCS. The couple was devastated and then was required by DFCS to take parenting classes, alcohol counseling, and psychological evaluations if they wanted to get their child back. All of the courses cost money for which most parents are required to pay. While in their anxiety and turmoil to get their child home, the baby was left for hours in a car to die in the heat in her car seat by a foster parent who forgot about the child. This should have never happened. It is tragic in many cases. After the parents have jumped through all the hoops, they still do not get their child back. 2 years. I was conspired against. My child was kept from me, and then they used that 4 months they kept my child from to terminate my rights. Oh, she didn't come visit her kid. Well, how could I? You told me he was sick for 4 months. Come on now. That's okay, though. Karma's coming, and they better be ready. It's funny. I don't really have to lift a finger. God kind of just does it all for me, which lets me know it's needed. As long as the child is not returned, there is money for the agency, foster parents, and for the adopted parents, and for the state. The state does not get money to return your children to you. The tax dollars are being used to keep this gigantic system afloat. Yet the victims, parents, grandparents, guardians, and especially children are charged for the system's services. Yep, we had to pay child support, and then they wanted us to give more money on top of that, while they paid people $900 to take care of our son. It makes no sense. They pay strangers to take care of your children, and then they take money from you too. That grandparents have called from all over the state of Georgia and all over the states trying to get custody of their grandchildren. CPS claims relatives are contacted, but there are many, many cases that prove differently. They never considered my mother. Never. Grandparents who lose their grandchildren to strangers have lost their own flesh and blood. The children lose their family heritage, and grandparents and parents too lose all connections to their heirs. That National Center on Child Abuse and Neglect in 1998 reported that 6 times as many children died in foster care than in the general public, and that once removed to official safety, these children are far more likely to suffer abuse, including sexual molestation, than in the general population. Think what that number is today, 10 years later. That according to California Little Hoover Commission report in 2003, 30 to 70% of children in California group homes do not belong there and should not have been removed from their homes. Over 80% of CPS reports are unfounded. So here are some recommendations that the parentalrights.org website says. Call for an independent audit of all state child protective services, of all CPS, and for a federal congressional hearing on child protective services nationwide. Activate immediate change. Every day that passes means more families and children are subject to being held hostage and their families destroyed. Abolish the federal and state financial incentives that have turned child protective services into a business that separates families for money. Grant to parents their rights verbally and in writing. Mandate a search for family members to be given the opportunity to adopt their own relatives if children need to be removed permanently. Mandate a jury trial where every piece of evidence is presented before permanently removing a child from his or her parents. Open family court. Remove the secrecy. Allow the press and family members access. Give parents the opportunity in court to speak and be a part of their children's future. Require a warrant or positive emergency circumstance before removing children from their parents. Judge Arthur G. Christian, Utah Bar Journal, January 1997, reported that except in emergency circumstances, including the need for immediate medical care, require warrants upon affidavits of probable cause before entry upon private property is permitted for the forcible removal of children from their parents. Uphold laws when someone fabricates or presents false evidence. Yes, we need to do this. We need to start punishing the people that call and falsify reports or evidence. If a parent alleges fraud, hold a hearing with the right of discovery to all evidence made available to parents. One more thing. On my desk are scores of cases of exhausted parents and terrified children. It has been beyond me to turn my back on these suffering, crying, and beaten down individuals. We are mistreating the most innocent. CPS have become an adult-centered business to the detriment of children. No longer is judgment based on what the child needs or who the child wants to be with or whom. It is or what is really best for the whole family. It is some adult or bureaucrat who makes the decisions based upon just hearsay, often without ever consulting a family member, or just whatever, or just what is convenient, profitable, or less troublesome for the social workers. I have witnessed such injustice and harm brought to so many families that I am not sure I am even believe if I even believe reform of the system is possible. That's pretty sad. The system cannot be trusted. It does not serve the people. It obliterates families and children simply because it has the power to do so. Children deserve better. Families deserve better. It's time to pull back the curtain and set our children and families free. Psalms 31, 8 through 9. Speak up for those who cannot speak up for themselves. For the rights of all who are destitute, speak up and judge fairly. Defend the rights of the poor and the needy. So if you want to learn how to fight, just start reading everything you can. I will continue to provide more information along the way. You can find all this information at parentalrights.org. I will link it below. Thank you for coming and listening, and I hope that all of you who are looking for justice find it.